Okay, so here we are again after the official opening. We hope that you don't get bored of us, but we'll try to be light or lighter than during the FIS conference. Well, as I said, we'll try to tell you what we have done during these 4 years and what's the main output of the action of the project, which is called the SignGram blueprint. The official name of the action is the one that you have here on the screen, which is a screenshot of our website where you can find some more details about the action and the work that we have done. The title is very ambitious: Unraveling the Grammars of European Sign Languages, Pathways to Full Citizenship for Deaf Signers and to the Protection of Their Linguistic Heritage. These are the ultimate goals that we want to reach with our work. We are aware of the fact that we are not yet there, but we hope that as a result of our research, some progress is made in this direction. When we submitted the proposal for this project, we first analyzed, we had to describe what was the starting point. And as all of you know, the starting point is one that we want to modify. The situation in general, in Europe, but also around the globe, is that sign languages have been traditionally denied the status of natural languages, that is, of full-fledged languages. And the fact that they are not seen as full-fledged languages has led to the discrimination of signing communities. This fact not only affects linguistic aspects of the communities or sociolinguistic aspects of the community, but also aspects pertaining to the exercise of citizenship of deaf signers. Normally, because of the language barrier and the non-recognition of sign languages as full-fledged languages, deaf signers cannot exercise citizenship fully. Next to this, mainstream society is mostly ignorant about the existence of this linguistic and cultural heritage in the continent. That is, for most of the population of our societies, sign languages are not seen as part of their linguistic background and culture. Looking at the situation from a more scientific point of view, we must acknowledge as well that the grammatical, the amount of grammatical knowledge that we have about sign languages is still very limited and fragmentary. This has two consequences. One, for public policies, for instance, in education and accessibility, in the sense that these policies are jeopardized because they lack the scientific knowledge that they should have available in order to implement those policies, like in deaf education, for instance. On the other hand, linguistics also has a problem, linguistics as a discipline, because the study of human language has been basically developed following or based on the knowledge that we have on spoken languages, and sign languages have not been represented significantly enough in the development of linguistics. Well, there is one crucial point in the perspective that we are drawing here, and that is the link between reference grammar and language transmission. Language transmission in deaf communities, in signing communities, is in some respects different from the one that we find in hearing communities, communities of speakers. Well, reference grammars are important, as you know, in an abstract sense, are important for language documentation. We want to know what human languages are like. We need to know what human languages are like. But there is also an applied side to it, which is that they are necessary for developing teaching materials used in different educational environments. When those reference grammars are not available, we do have a problem. And this problem is very much felt in educational practice for deaf children, but also for learners of sign language as second language. Related to the way that sign language is transmitted, we should also be aware that many signers do acquire sign language beyond the natural period to acquire a language in general, that is the first years of life. Because most deaf individuals are born into deaf families, so they are not, hearing families, sorry, so they are not exposed to sign language from the very start of their lives. So learning sign language at a later stage requires having available different materials and different acquisition options that are made difficult when we don't know what the language is like in their workings. So then again, for sign language teaching, as a first language or as a second language, but also for interpreter training. Interpreters play a central role in the communication between hearing and deaf individuals in many situations. So ensuring the quality of interpreter training also requires having a well-developed grammatical knowledge, among other aspects of the language. And typically, sign language training programs do focus mostly on lexicon, and they neglect grammatical aspects. This is the reality. Although grammatical aspects play a very central role in learning and teaching a language. So by now, we know how important it is to fill this gap in our linguistic knowledge about sign languages. There is an added dimension to this gap, which has to do with special populations of signers. Not having these grammatical descriptions available also jeopardizes the possibilities that we have to address the needs of such special populations, and under this label we mean children with specific language impairment, with SLI, patients of aphasia, that is patients that as a result of some lesion have been affected in their language faculty, and also elderly signers who have some neurodegenerative disease. So in order to address the needs of these special populations, we need to be able to diagnose grammatical impairments, and also for planning intervention of any type. So again, grammar is appearing as a central component in the actions that we need to take, in the policies that we need to implement. Given this background, we wanted to write and develop a project that could address some of these central difficulties. And for this, we're lucky enough to be granted this cost action, which ended up being formed by 30 participating countries, 13, sorry. which included 14 cell languages. And here you have, just as an illustration, the ones that are included in the action. I should also mention that there have been two non-cost countries, that is, countries that do not belong to this framework, Argentina and Australia, that also have participated in our project. So,
so now finally we describe this famous blueprint, okay, that we have been talking about up to now. So blueprint, it's a guide to write reference grammars for sign languages. And of course we say European sign languages, but this tool is available for description of any sign language in principle, by using a new format. Okay, and now we will give concrete example in this part of our presentation. Okay, first of all, many grammatical aspects of signs are difficult to describe in a traditional book format. Think, for example, about movement trajectory or movement path. Even pictures cannot be fully described movement path. So we thought that an effective instrument should integrate text, pictures, but videos as well. Another general property that we think it's useful and we implemented is an extensive use of hyperlinking. What do we mean by hyperlinking in this case? Well, there are concepts that are described or commented on in different parts of the product that we have delivered. And so their description is scattered in maybe in several places. When this concept pops up, you will be able to link on that word and will take you to the other part of our product in which that concept is also described. So you can easily go from one part of the blueprint to another part of the blueprint. In practice, the output that we are talking about will be published as an ebook in PDF format, but with links to videos. If it were a traditional book, it will be long. It will be approximately 700 pages long. Okay. It will be published open access, so freely available to everyone, with the greater Mouton. And it will be out in, let's say, 1 year, or maybe a little less than 1 year. It's almost done, I mean, but editing and revising will take time, and also, okay? Okay. Now, the structure of this blueprint. It is done by two main parts. The first one we call checklist, and the second one we call manual. And again, you will see concrete example in a moment. So, the checklist, you can think about it as an extended table of content, if you want. And it's an inventory of all the linguistic features that, according to what we did, a comprehensive grammatical description should contain. Okay? It will be more concrete in a second. I just want to say before giving example that this table of content is based on what we know today in the field of sign linguistics, but it also incorporates today knowledge as reflected in descriptive and theoretical linguistics. Okay? So basically a checklist is a list. Okay? a structured list, as you see in a moment. The second product is what we call a manual. And the manual contains guidelines and background information that is useful and necessary for the grammar writer of a given sign language if he wants to implement the checklist. Okay? So, and the manual contains, for example, description and definition of the phenomenon, which is listed in the checklist, which is included. It contains representative examples from actual sign languages in which that phenomenon is attested. It also contains tests that can be used to identify the phenomenon when the phenomenon is complex enough, as in most cases, which requires, you know, some tests, linguistic tests to identify it. It contains also elicitation material that target the phenomenon. So remember, the manual is intended for a grammar writer of a language, of a sign language, for which little is known. So the actual grammar writer should identify the phenomenon and to have materials to elicit that phenomenon. The manual contains also pointers to the relevant literature, scientific literature, the most relevant one, when this exists. And it contains, in general, methodological advice. Okay? So, table of contents, or as we call it, checklist and manual, are two combined instruments. Okay, let's see the checklist organization. It is divided in 5 parts. One is lexicon. The second one is phonology. The third one is morphology, syntax, and meaning. Meaning covers what is also traditionally called semantics and pragmatics. And now we will see examples from this. So let us start, for example, this is a rough summary of the lexicon part. I don't expect you to read this. But I will comment on the internal organization. You have something which is called the native lexicon with many, many sub-headings. Something which is called non-native lexicon with many, many sub-headings. Something which is called part of speech. And something which is called lexical fields. Thank you. Okay. So some of it is maybe transparent enough. For example, part of speech is a rather traditional concept in grammars. Okay? But maybe we want to say something about the distinction between native and non-native lexicon. Okay, non-native lexicon we decided to give importance to this and to stress it because the non-native lexicon is probably more important in sign language than it is in, for example, in spoken languages. Because in the native lexicon, you have borrowings from our sign languages, and this is common also, of course, in spoken languages. But in sign language, you can often have borrowings from neighboring spoken language, for example. And you also have borrowings from gestures, conventionalized gestures. Okay, so this is a thing that it should be slightly different in a grammar for sign language. And then native lexicon, okay? Native lexicon is divided in 2 parts and interaction between the 2 parts. The first one is the core lexicon, and the second part is non-core lexicon. Okay. So this is something which is maybe not totally transparent to everyone. So this is a case in which the manual can become useful. Okay. So at this moment we go from the checklist to the manual. Okay. And see what the manual tells about this distinction between core and non-core lexicon. Okay, if you go to the manual, you have a description and detailed description, and at the end of the description you have this table. Again, I don't expect you to read this table, but this is a summary of the description in the manual, and I will comment on only on two differences between core and non-core lexicon. So first of all, just to give you an idea of what we have in mind, for non-core lexicon, we mean something like, for example, classifier predicates. Okay? And so here we read that one property of non-core lexicon is, and it's the second one from the top, that space and movement are used topographically or isomorphically. Okay, this may not be transparent for everyone and not even for a grammar writer, but if you look at the manual, it is explained that by this we mean that, for example, in non-core lexicon, the movement path, for example, of a classifier is expected, roughly speaking, to reflect more or less closely the actual movement of the object which is depicted. However, this does not happen with a core lexicon item. For example, I don't know, think about your sign for tree in a sign language. Typically, the sign for tree doesn't need to reflect an actual movement of a tree in the real world. Okay? Okay? Another distinguishing property is that typically the core lexicon varies a lot from sign language to sign language, and sometimes, often, from variety to variety, from dialect to dialect. Okay? The core lexicon is more stable. Varies, but not that much. Okay? And so this is this was just to give you an idea of how the lexicon part is organized. Now, let us see another example. So let us go to the syntax part. The syntax part is divided in these 6 sections, and I won't read them, all of them, but you can have a look at them. And I will so let us focus, for example, on the first one, sentence types. And now let us look at the checklist for sentence type. It's not completed, but it's a part of it, but it gives you an idea. So, for example, sentence type is the traditional distinction between declarative, interrogatives, imperatives, and other didn't fit in the slide, but this is. Now, you see how it is organized. Now, let us make an example of a subsection. So, under the section imperative, you find a subsection which is 1.3.2.1, and this subsection is about manual signs for imperatives. And now let us go to the manual to see how the manual is organized in combination to this. Okay, this is more or less what you find. It's summarized here. So the manual says, you know, there are some spoken languages that have a specific morpheme to mark imperatives. And it's briefly mentioned that some languages exist. As for sign languages, the manual says, the grammar writer should verify the presence of specific morphosyntactic manual markings expressing the imperative modality in that language. Okay, and then it says a manual sign expressing imperative is attested in some sign languages, and these include, for example, Italian Sign Language and the Sign Language of the Netherlands. And then the manual contains an example and a link to a video. Okay? And now, ideally, let's see. Okay. This is the video associated to the example. Can you see it properly? told me that it will be. Yes, it's like this. So it and then this sign which is palm up. Okay. So I hope I swear that the final product will work better than this presentation.
The technical details are
The technical details are not yet, as you can easily see. But you got an idea of how this works, okay? And now another example, the meaning part. First of all, the meaning part is something innovative in this grammar, because usually the part of meaning in grammars is distributed. Sometimes in syntax, somewhere in syntax, somewhere in morphology. It's quite uncommon to have a meaning part in a grammar, for spoken languages as well, in general. Here we decided to focus on this, and it is divided in two parts, meaning of words and sentences and meaning in discourse. And again, here we have an example, so meaning in discourse. This is how the meaning in discourse part is organized in the checklist. Again, I won't read it, but let's see an example. So one part is about reference, one subpart, let's say, a section. And then let us see how the reference section is internally organized. It's organized in this way. Again, I won't read it, but I will give you a moment to have a look. And now let's see, for example, one example of a manual. So the manual that accompanies section 2.1.2.2. Okay? So this is the part of the manual for this subsection. And this says, in some sign languages, the co-articulation of squinted eyes on the noun phrase denotes discourse reference that are both known and familiar by the discourse participants. Basically, discourse reference that are definite, okay? And then there is an example for a sign language. And when it says, you know, raised eyebrows also marks shared knowledge. So also raised eyebrows is a potential nominal marking for definiteness. And there is an example from another sign language. And here the last things I want to do is, you see this topic, why is it in red? Well, because we decided to have in the manual a glossary. So when a term is useful to define, we have a glossary that explains the term. So what you do, you click on it, and the definition will pop up. And so this is, for example, a definition of what a topic is in the linguistic literature. Okay, there are also challenges, but those are for Josep, not for me.
Well, fortunately, we have addressed the challenges collectively. And essentially, the challenges come down to the fact that, well, some languages present some properties which cannot be easily described from the perspective of a traditional description of spoken languages. I mean, we have relied a lot on existing knowledge about description of spoken languages, but of course, aspects like the phonology of some languages, particular properties of the agreement systems that we find in language individual gestural modality, classifiers, the use of space, etc., need to be addressed in a particular way in the blueprint, because there is no tradition in the descriptive work that we could rely on. And just to illustrate the kind of challenges that we faced, we're going to show briefly what we've done with the phenomenon of role shift in some languages. As most of you know, role shift is a strategy that some languages have, and they typically use to report speech or attitudes, if you want, thoughts of other people. So when I report someone's words or when I report someone's thoughts, I typically use role shift. Role shift is typically marked overtly with an array of non-manual markers. And the most important ones are a break in the ice gate direction when you introduce the role shift. Also, body shift sometimes, so a slight movement of the body towards location of the space that you identify with the character that you are reporting about. And the same, and also facial expression, a change in facial expression that relates to the character being reported about. Just for those of you who are not acquainted with the phenomenon, you should think that it's related to the cases of reported speech, direct and indirect reports. Cases like John said that he is tired in English, but also cases of direct quotes like John said, I'm tired. And as you might have noticed in the English examples, we also find referential displacement. That is, elements, grammatical elements like personal pronouns do shift in reference when they appear in these reports, in some types of these reports. What's particularly interesting in the case of sign languages is that role shift presents both properties, properties of both direct and indirect reports, as is known for spoken languages, or the typical cases of spoken languages. One of the main, some of the issues that need to be addressed in studying role shift is, for example, whether they constitute cases of subordination. That is, are they regular embedded clauses or not? Or are they quotes, direct quotes, literally reproducing the words attributed to someone else? Also, the fact that role shift is not only used to report speech, the words of someone else, but also attitudes, thoughts, or mental states with respect to a proposition. And to make things a little bit more complicated, in sign language discourse, role shift appears intertwined almost always with what is called constructed action. And constructed action, put in very simple words, is basically a gestural enactment of activities that the character engages in, the character you are talking about engages in while speaking or thinking. The basic challenge that we had to face is where to put role shift in the blueprint. Should it actually go into the syntax part as a case of subordination? Or should it rather go into the meaning part as a phenomenon related to discourse, as a discourse strategy, together with constructed action, which is clearly a discourse strategy? Well, given the structure and the nature of the blueprint, the solution that we adopted is the one that we will show next, which is essentially dealing with it, tackling it in two different parts. And this is easy in the kind of product that we have created. So, in the meaning part, we have a special section about reporting and role shift. And at the same time, in the syntax part, we have a subsection under the header for argument clauses, that is, subordinated clauses that act as an argument of a predicate. We don't need to get into the details, but essentially, this is the case of subject clauses and object clauses. And as a special case, we devoted a whole subsection to role shift, and more particularly to the issue whether the role shift fragment behaves as a subordinated clause to a main predicate, as in English, John said that he is tired, or whether it behaves like as an independent syntactic unit, as in a direct quote. John said, I'm tired. And without getting into much detail, I mean, just to illustrate again, the idea is checking whether certain syntactic phenomena can take place between the role shift and the matrix clause. This is called long-distance dependencies. And one example of a long-distance dependencies is a WH movement in a WH question that would involve moving the WH phrase from inside the role shift fragment into the main clause, as represented here with the arrow. If the result of this is grammatical, it means, in principle, that the role shift fragment behaves as a subordinated clause, subordinated to a main predicate. Maybe this is too much detail, but it just gives you the gist of the way we have constructed all these test cases. And we hope that with these little examples that we've discussed with you very briefly and very quickly, that you got an idea of how the blueprint is constructed and designed. To conclude, we hope, we are still convinced that the blueprint is an innovative tool in the field of sign language research, because we don't have anything like this to be used currently. And we also hope that the blueprint itself can go into a second phase if it gets implemented as an electronic platform to develop sign language grammars online. This is not part of our project, our current project, but is something that should be thought for the future, given that an electronic platform would be much more flexible and would allow much more interaction among researchers. And these were our more concrete goals. But of course, we aim at bigger goals with the project. So despite the challenges, we hope that it will make a difference in the documentation of sign languages around the globe, not only in Europe, so that the actual grammars based on this blueprint will pop up naturally once the tool is available, so that we get much more description of sign languages globally. And just going back to the scenario that we described at the beginning of the presentation, if this happens, and it happens in the proper way, the emergence, the existence of grammatical description for many more sign languages around the globe should also constitute the basis for the policies that should make a difference for signers and as language users and also as citizens. And with this, we'd like to conclude our presentation. And of course, we want to thank you for your attention. And we'll have some time for discussion to answer your questions. We are sure that there are many questions open, and some of them we hope to be able to answer.
Thanks a lot, Josep and Carlo, for this amazing presentation and for having led us to see a little bit of your fantastic tool in the field. I'm sure this should be a schema general, useful general for other languages and different fields. So we have some minutes to ask questions, if you want questions or comments. Yeah? No questions or comments? Do you want to go to have a coffee, to have a break? Okay, loud. The microphone is okay, thanks.
Hello, my name is Ben Bahan. I am extremely envious of the project that you've set up, the information that is presented within. So my question is kind of which comes first, the horse or the cart? And in saying this, I mean, are we looking at corpus data to show us examples of what happens in the language and then interpretations of what that corpus data means grammatically? Or are we looking at kind of right word movement syntactically and trying to find elicited examples of how that happens or might happen in sign language? Because I've been working in the field long enough to know that people are going to reinterpret whatever you do anyway. So I'm wondering whether or what your approach is. My preference is to have all the data there to start with and then kind of dive into it to explain all of the data. And so I'm not sure what I'm seeing, what you've shown has enough sign language raw data before you're presenting the blueprint or how to make the blueprint. So my question is, is this kind of a work in progress to provide more examples? This is obviously just a wonderful tool to use. And if the project is finished, then who takes over if that's what needs to be done? Who's going to maintain the blueprint? And that's obviously part of data collection as well. I've been involved in data collection, corpus building at University of Rochester, University of Texas, different universities in the States, and we're trying to do it as well at Gallaudet University. But one of the main questions is, what happens when the money runs out? So I'm wondering if you've considered that. This is probably more than one question, but I'm not sure if you can provide us with any answers on that.
Well, thank you very much for your questions maybe and comments. I mean, these are not trivial issues, of course. Maybe one clarification to start with is that the blueprint is meant to be used basically with elicited data. So actually the blueprint provides the guidelines about how to elicit data for the grammatical phenomena that you want to collect and describe. So this is our starting point. But this does not exclude that you can combine the two types of data. Okay, so incorporate also corpus data to the extent that they exist, because as you know, some languages do already have a corpus available and some other languages don't. So somehow we start from scratch. I mean, this should be a neutral tool that could be used in principle by anyone who wants to describe any cell language. And it might be that we want to describe a village cell language that doesn't have any research at all, or only some research is existing. So yes, I mean that was our starting point. The second issue about the continuity, I mean, we're very much aware of the issue that you raised. Okay, now we have a tool. Who's going to do the work? Well, this is the challenge. I mean, we want to find a way, I mean, to promote the use of the blueprint, but of course we cannot oblige anyone to use it. To the extent that it can be, I mean, it will be an open access publication. So we actually got requests from different parts of the globe. I mean, people have heard about the initiative and they were asking about, so where's the blueprint? Where can we get it? Well, I mean, not yet, but it will be available online and free access, open access for anyone to use it. And as we mentioned, if we manage to get an online version of it, I mean, an online platform for grammar writing itself, this will even facilitate the task even more, right? And then this would become, I mean, to the extent that people start writing grammars, you would have like a sort of a growing repository of sign language grammars on the same platform. So you can use it as a tool to write your grammars, but the ones that are available or partially available, you can also have them there. So that's the idea behind it. It's true that we don't have like a roadmap where to get the money and how to implement this project, but hopefully we'll keep trying, and eventually we hope to find a way to pursue this direction.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that while writing this blueprint, we also made some actual experiments, at least one systematically. So we took one topic that is, or was, I should say, understudied in sign language, and that was imperative. Okay, and we said, let's see if a tool like this helps. And so we did a study of imperatives in five sign languages by using the relevant chapter. So we tried, we couldn't do that for the entire things, it's impossible, of course. But we use it as an actual tool ourselves. And we think that at least in that situation it worked. So we try to make it, and something maybe we should stress, it is as user-friendly as possible. So there is, it has been inspired by our grammatical knowledge, but it doesn't presuppose much grammatical knowledge, or at least we strive to keep the necessary knowledge as little as possible, for example, by introducing glossary and description, by keeping the language not technical. So we had in mind this consideration to make it as user-friendly as possible, I think. At least we tried.
But we assume that people using the blueprint should have some kind of training in grammar writing or linguistics. I mean, probably no, a naive person about language couldn't use it. So there is a minimum threshold that you need to, but we try to keep that threshold the lowest possible.
Is there any other contribution, question? So late. Oh, sorry.
I'm Claudia Macht. I'm a student at University of Hamburg, and we are really looking forward for this blueprint to get on our own researches. It's really great. But since it's such a sensitive field, do you have anything on ethics regarding sign language research in the blueprint for new researchers to, I don't know, consider starting research?
Well, I mean, we didn't talk. I mean, the blueprint in the final form will have a general introduction where we give, let's say, general guidelines also about this. I mean, we don't intend to develop like ethical guidelines, also because they are being developed by the relevant bodies. For example, there is at least one initiative in the Sign Language Linguistics Society. Which I think we should take as reference. So we will not develop a particular one. We'll just like refer the reader to the existing consensus about this. But it's important that, that the reader knows about the existence of this. As for starting research, there are also some resources available, and we'll point those out in the introductory part to the blueprint. But as we also said, I mean, we try to, it's not like an encyclopedia of cell languages. I mean, the pointers to the bibliography are always like very selective. So like the crucial information that is needed to understand the phenomenon, the most important readings about a particular topic. So it shouldn't be thought as a kind of handbook on cell language. It's not. It's a different kind of object. That's the idea. But of course, all those considerations should also appear in some part of the introduction. Thank you for pointing that out.
So, if you want, let's take a break, take a break, and we will come back at 3:45 for panel presentations, 3 panel presentations. So, thanks.
Yes, for those of you who hadn't been here during FIST, please don't leave your bags or your valuables in the room, because
Take care of your thing.
a couple of laptops were stolen even during the time that we were outside of the room.
So we were a little long, but with this double translation, it was not important. No, exactly. So
And in the end,
yeah,
there were
it was
not so
okay.
many
Yeah.
comments.
Yeah.